the treatment of, in social media terms, of some of our witnesses from last week. Whether we agree with what everybody tells us in these committees or disagree with everything that they say to us, we are a democratically accountable scrutiny committee of the House of Commons, where free speech and democracy are our hallmarks. On behalf of the committee, I want to say that the intimidation, if you will, of those witnesses on social media by those who frankly should hang their head in shame this morning is not acceptable. I know that those witnesses and others will not be cowed from speaking truth under power. And as far as I'm concerned, and whilst I'm in the chair, nobody, no voice will be silenced from giving their thoughts and opinions on topical issues as they affect Northern Ireland. And for those who want to take a different view, I suggest they go and find a country where the rule of law, democracy, and free speech are not the hallmarks that we all cherish. Right, I've got that off my chest and I feel a whole lot better for it. So now let's turn to the business in hand. I'm going to ask our witnesses in turn, please. I'm going to start, I think, with Mr. Kelly. So, Stephen, you're on first. You're on first point. We saw you earlier in the year. Could you just give us, over a few moments, a few minutes, your assessment of things, how things are working, where you are identifying problems and where they've been solved, or where a solution is within grasp or within sight, things where you hoped there might have been a solution, but to which that solution appears to be elusive. And I suppose an overall assessment of your sectoral outlook with regards to how things stand today as they stood against at the top of the year. So, Mr. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. Rather than my opinion, Chair, I'd rather share some results from survey work that we've undertaken with the sector, because just like my other colleagues who are witnesses this morning, what we do and say is directed by them. So it's important that I bring their voice forward on this. We surveyed the manufacturing community at the end of month 1. We surveyed them at the end of month 3, and we've begun surveying them now at the end of month 6, and we'll repeat that again at the end of the year. And the most recent survey that we have validated results for relates to the end of the 3rd month period. We will share the results of the end of month 6 once that becomes validated, and we'll share that information with the committee for its inquiry. What we do know is that at the end of month 3, 77% of manufacturers said that the first 3 months following the end of the transition period had a negative impact upon their business. When we looked at separating that out in terms of two particular markets, both the rest of the UK and the EU, when we relate to, and when we get the feedback in terms of GB business, 36% said that they were currently struggling with the new processes and they believed that that struggle would persist. So 1 in 3 manufacturers at the end of March believed that those challenges that they were unveiling for themselves, whether that be customs challenges or challenges in terms of supply chains, were likely to persist at that point. 1/3 had said that they had a negative impact on their sales to GB. So it was in both directions rather than just the single direction. For comparison, the figure at the end of January was 25%. So that number had grown a little bit as confusion continued around Northern Ireland's status within both the UK's market and the EU's market. And most concerning was that 1 in 5, 20%, said that their UK suppliers were simply unwilling to continue to supply to Northern Ireland. When we get below the bonnet on that number, and that hadn't moved terribly much from January, but when we get below the bonnet on that number, it relates to essentially 2 things. One is the new complexities that were introduced on the 1st of January in terms of moving goods from GB into Northern Ireland, which the committee has explored a lot of. But in addition to that, and no one seems to be exploring this in any great detail at all, but it's actually the impact of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement as well as the protocol, and how the two of those documents and the two of those agreements, where there's frictions between both of those. So if I gave it, for instance, in the negotiations that led to the TCA, the EU were clear that the UK's position as a centre of distribution for Europe, and included in that would obviously be Northern Ireland, that position would be diminished. And that is an outcome from the negotiations that the UK accepted in the end. So as a practical example, I have a member who would purchase from a German EU-based factory a piece of engineering equipment. That piece of engineering equipment travels from Germany to that German company's subsidiary plant in Britain, where there's modifications made, and those modifications are for rules in the UK and indeed Irish marketplace. Because that axle has left the German manufacturers and it's left the EU's union customs area, its identity is no longer EU. And because there's only minor modification in the German company's subsidiary in Britain, it doesn't pick up a UK origin at that point. So the problem then is that when those axles are moved from GB to Northern Ireland, it is at risk of a tariff being applied. So whilst those German axles from a German company in a German factory can travel tariff-free to the rest of the UK, because it doesn't pick up a UK identity, because there isn't sufficient processing, and they're at risk of going back into the EU, a tariff then could be applied when it moves from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. Now, I know that there was no intent, either in the protocol or elsewhere, that we would have a scenario like that, where we would have EU goods who are supposedly meant to freely circulate to Northern Ireland would actually potentially have that tariff applied to them. But it's an outcome from the type of agreement that the UK and the EU have concluded in terms of its own future relationship outside of the protocol and outside of the operation of the border in the Irish Sea. It is resolvable. The challenge is that the operation of the protocol, the operational plan for the protocol, was agreed before the final agreement on the UK and EU's future relationship in terms of the TCA was concluded. And there is an opportunity in terms of continuing to have discussions around the protocol which can resolve an item like this, that would allow, for instance, the economic identity of that piece of engineering equipment to travel its entire journey to Northern Ireland. Pardon me, Chair. But that's one of the issues outside of the administrative challenges that GB businesses face in terms of sending to Northern Ireland that no one seems to be exploring. No committee, certainly not this committee, seems to be actually understanding, well, where is the interface between the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and the protocol, and where is that causing unnecessary friction and arriving at an outcome that's not intended by either side. So when we look at the EU side, I've mentioned GB already, 46% of EU suppliers are reported to be either unaware, unprepared, or unwilling to supply to Northern Ireland, and that was up from 30%, and that's quite a rise. Now, the challenge that is identified there is that despite reports leading up to the end of 2020 that the EU were ready for no deal, that their authorities and their member states were ready, there hasn't been that education program in the EU that explains to suppliers or indeed customers, but more particularly to customs authorities and others in member states, that goods from Northern Ireland and goods destined for Northern Ireland are meant to freely flow. So there's a big piece of work required still from the European Union and the Commission to educate authorities and customers in the EU that Northern Ireland's status is different than the rest of the UK. And when we look at sales to the EU, 29% at the end of March had said that their sales had been impacted, and that's marginally up from 23%. So this presents a problem currently, but it actually presents an opportunity. So you'll have heard conversations from the Commission Vice President around a potential investment conference, for instance, for Northern Ireland, which was one of the ideas that came out of the Northern Ireland Business Brexit Working Group's engagements with both the UK and the EU. And this is an opportunity for us to actually market Northern Ireland within that marketplace, both to resolve some of these frictions that appear to be in place, but also to provide an opportunity to sell Northern Ireland in these marketplaces as well. So in terms of the outcome from that survey work, some of that stuff was quite negative, but there's quite significant positives in there as well. So the committee will already be aware that in the first number of months of this year, trade from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland, for instance, is up more than 60%. We are having reports from pretty much right across manufacturing that their sales are significantly increased over and above where they believe they would be as a result of the downturn due to COVID last year. We know from Invest NI that there's more than 30 FDI inquiries, and I believe that there may be news on some of that stuff over the summer months, which is positive. But we also know that when we've spoken to the manufacturing community, more than half now are saying that the Northern Ireland executive need to be grasping the opportunities and promoting those opportunities to markets here at home in the UK and across Europe. It's the single biggest ask that they have of our politicians and our executive. And then lastly, to say we have asked them about their opinion about what they'd like done about the protocol. And in February, at the end of the January first month period, 19% had said that they wish the protocol to be scrapped. At the end of the first 3 months, that had dropped marginally to 18%. So there's no huge shift in desire, despite what was happening on the streets at the time in Northern Ireland, that the protocol be scrapped at this point.
Stephen, just give me those figures again, please.
So at the end of, I'll share the report with the committee afterwards, Chair.
Thank you.
But at the end of month 1, 19% had wished the protocol to be completely removed. At the end of month 3, that had dropped very marginally to 18%. But more than half now wish the Northern Ireland executive to identify and to grasp the opportunities that are presented there.
When you say more than half, can you give us the figure for that?
I'll get you the precise figure now. It was just a summary that I had in front of me, Chair, but I'll get you that precise figure now in a second.
Mr. Chairman, while Stephen's looking for that, was the question asked of how many want the protocol to be changed?
Yeah, so more than half. I have that answer as well. I'm just trying to find the report. If you bear with me just 2 seconds.
I tell you what, Stephen,
I have them now, Chair. Apologies for that.
That's okay.
So the question was asked, 55% wish for the protocol to work by agreeing mitigations, derogations, and compensation. 54% want more work to go on. 54% want more work to go on in terms of preparing GB businesses to continue to supply and to buy from Northern Ireland. 47% wish the EU to do more work to educate EU firms that they can continue to trade with Northern Ireland. 46% want the Northern Ireland executive to identify and secure new opportunities, and 18% wish the protocol to be replaced.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kelly, thank you for that overview. That's helpful. Colleagues will have questions. Same questions. Let's go to Sarah Hards next. Sarah, nice to see you again. Good morning. The same questions or the same question to you, please, if you want to sort of set the scene, your personal business outlook, and then any intel you have from your sector would be valuable to us. Thank you.
Of course. Just a reminder, I work for AM Next Day, and we're a logistics company based in Larne.
Do you want to, do we sing the company jingle now?
We're working on some new branding here, so hopefully next time we meet there'll be something behind us, you know.
We'll all wear our t-shirts next time. So
yeah. Okay. No problem. Great. So where do we start, really?
At the very beginning, according to Mary Poppins.
Yeah, okay. One of our main issues in February when we met last time was that we had much more freight going out of Northern Ireland into GB than coming in. We had maybe a third of trailers coming back empty. That is still the case. So it's very much Northern Ireland's doing a great job at producing goods and sending them out to Ireland and GB. However, there's still definitely a lack of goods coming in. I think Stephen mentioned it there about education for GB suppliers. That's one thing I was really keen on, is trying to get these GB suppliers on board with bringing their goods across to Northern Ireland and sending them across themselves, rather than Northern Irish businesses having to kind of bring them across, because it's really not, there's new red tape, there's a whole layer of customs that is now in place, but it's manageable. So yeah, we're still seeing that lack of goods coming across for us. Therefore, running costs are up. We knew this was going to happen. This is due to shipping increases, customs declarations. Driver salaries have increased quite greatly. We know that there's a huge driver shortage. We're very, very busy here, and we just do not have the drivers to facilitate these deliveries. So costs are going up and service is going down, really. So that leads to quite a lot of discontent within our customer base, both the smaller customers we deliver to on a day-to-day basis and our large retailers as well. Now let me see. Now from our retail side of things, many of our retailers have stopped bringing fresh goods in from GB and are now sourcing within the island of Ireland. And although that, you would think that's great for the economy here, it doesn't work well for our retailers. We've spent years working with them very, very closely, planning exactly how things are going to be delivered. We have a 1 hour window to kind of get in and get out of many of these stores. It's done through the night, through the day. Everything is just so specific and time critical that now, instead of receiving 1 delivery per day, and it's very, very fluid, it's a seamless thing. Now they're receiving 3 or 4 because they're getting direct deliveries from the the meat supplier, the bread supplier, etc., etc. So productivity for them has gone from very high to much lower. So we're seeing that straight away. Another thing we have to do as well, or we're looking into, because I know there's got to be more more declarations required as of October for different types of food groups. We're looking at splitting loads. So instead of everything coming across on one big trailer, we're going to have a trailer full of goods that require customs declarations but don't require checks, and no SPS goods, etc. So we're going to have a trailer of that, and then we'll have another trailer full of these SPS goods. So straight away, your trailer fill is going to be down. The most expensive part of delivering into Northern Ireland is bringing it over the Irish Sea. One of our skills was to plan, so there was maximum amount of goods in that trailer, and that's going to go down. So it gets more expensive for our customer. And again, one of our skills was cost saving, really stripping it back and bringing it down. And that means our skill set is kind of as set aside, and we're not a specialized haulier so much anymore. Let me see, TSS. We're still having a few issues with them. It's very hard to kind of get things changed. If you're having any issues, you get through to someone who's quite junior. I think I've been trying to resolve supplementary declaration issues for 3 months now, We've been named as the importer incorrectly. We then have to go back to find out who the actual importer is. To even do that for one declaration takes maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. So we've got maybe 100 on there now. So trying to get all this information is very, very laboursome. And it's all based on us, which seems very unfair when we've been named in error. It would be better if the TSS could do kind of some investigations themselves, but it's very much based on kind of the users of TSS, even if they, kind of didn't do it themselves. So I think with TSS, it's very hard to kind of get your issue resolved. And there doesn't seem to be, a chain of command there. I feel like, you were kind of left to it with people who are very junior, who maybe just don't have the experience. Let me see. But yeah, that's kind of where we are at the minute. The driver shortage is very, very difficult. We are advertising for drivers. I think our class 2, so the rigid vehicles, the salary for that has gone up 15% in the last 18 months. And for the class 1 drivers, the larger vehicles, it's gone up probably about 20%. We thought this would be great. We thought advertising, with these increased rates would, bring the drivers in straight away. And in all honesty, it's almost embarrassing advertising, because the kind of the response from the drivers is that this isn't enough. That it's we're not paying enough, but we know we're paying more than market rate. So I just don't know where we will go next to get drivers.
Ms. Hunt, what do you, because I mean, this is a short, you've spoken to do things, and you'll know that across GB, there's a shortage of HGV drivers. Certainly talking to businesses in my constituency, I'd warrant that my colleagues here probably hear the same things as well, which is access to staff and recruitment. To what are you ascribing this sudden staff shortage? Is it furlough and people's reticence to move off furlough in case the data points in a different direction? Is it freedom of movement linked? What are you putting it to?
I think it's a perfect storm of COVID and Brexit, with many people being on furlough and being quite happy to be on furlough, and then also with the kind of the European drivers as well. Not wanting to stay in the UK. So I think it really is a mixture of both. So we have kind of COVID and Brexit playing their part here, but it's just...
If I could interrupt, testing's been disrupted as well. We haven't had as many new drivers coming through, despite the fact anyone who's an apprentice can get free training at the moment.
There, Sarah speaks, a former Minister of State at the Department for Transport. So...
Thank you. No, that is definitely, we've seen that as well, that there's just no new drivers coming through. However, for a class 2 driver who's kind of freshly qualified, we can bring them in, we can kind of do some in-house training and get them covered for insurance purposes. When it comes to class 1, our insurance company will not cover them. Will just not cover them. I think recently we got one driver put on, and an excess for any type of accident, however small, was £3,500. So it doesn't make sense for us to try and bring someone on so junior. We just couldn't. We could afford it on a one-off, you know what I mean? But it's just too much of a risk. Okay,
thank you for that. Victor Chestnut. I know from my own, I know from my own constituency the little ray of sunshine and joy that farmers always are. Always a happy, gladsome smile of a morning. So cheer us all up from the Ulster Farmers Union.
Well, the sun is shining, I suppose, and neither Brexit nor COVID has affected our weather. So
hay is being made.
Yes. But yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for Committe for giving us the time again. I was here 6 months ago, almost when I started to prepare again. It seemed like a deja vu. We're just back with the same issues. There has been this willingness politically for Europe and the UK to engage on small issues that are very real on farms to sort out. And community tension, therefore, in Northern Ireland is rising. And, you know, it's unfortunate that I have to report that, but that is the fact. Many of these things could have been sorted out. I think the last time I was on, I spoke about bull sales, nothing sorted, sheep stuck in Scotland, still in Scotland. Things haven't moved on that. Perfectly legitimate solutions for that. We have that traceability system here where animals can do their residency in Northern Ireland. But the political will doesn't seem to be there to enact these solutions. Having said that, not all parts of the protocol are not working. I'll get through the sectors. Really, we are a livestock sector in Northern Ireland. We grow grass. We usually have plenty of rain. We're having a drier year this year, but our red meat sector seems to be coping fairly well, being able to look both ways. So we wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The biggest issue in the red meat sector is rising costs to do with paperwork and declarations, and indeed what we're just coming off the labour shortages, huge problems there within our labour market. And we're in a slightly different place in the UK because of our land border with ROI. And if people feel more content to come and work in ROI, they're not going to come to the northerly part of this island. So we need some probably sector specific arrangements for labour in Northern Ireland that are slightly different to the rest of the UK. Move over into the dairy industry, very important to Northern Ireland. We still have the issue with milk going south for further processing, having this label of mixed origin put on it. In fact, just very recently, there was a report from the Oireachtas in Dublin there, very useful, where they are trying to urge the EU to give flexibility. If we're working in a EU regulatory zone and our milk's going to the south to be further processed to go outside of Europe, the final market could be Asia or East Africa. It needs to be considered as product of the EU. And at the minute, it's not. It's getting this label mixed origin, which doesn't add value to anything. So still some issues there. Having said that, the dairy industry, our milk is flowing south of the border as it needs to, because we haven't the processing capacity here in the north. So not all bad news there. On the grain issue, we had that issue where we're worried about tariffs. That's still there. Maybe hasn't come to the fore in that it will only come to the fore when the cheapest place to import grain from is, our main place is GB and UK, where we import our grain from. But for instance, if Ukrainian grain was cheaper, it could come into the UK on a UK quota, tariff-rate quota. Our southern counterparts in ROI could import it on an EU quota, but we're stuck in no man's land. We can't bring it in because if we bring it in from the UK, it's of danger of going into the ROI and somewhere the other way. So we won't be able to avail if that became the cheapest place. So we have to go to the next cheapest source, which could add anything for 2 or 3 tons. Then on things like minerals and amino acids, a lot of that comes from the UK. Some of that is manufactured in Europe, and we have to be very careful there, because if we, it's going back to the same as the German axles, the very same argument as that. If it comes into the UK, if it's not manufactured enough in the UK and doesn't get the UK stamp on it, then we could be paying a tariff on that. So meal companies are having to watch that. On farm, the EU rules are giving difficulties, parts for machinery and all that. That has slowed up, and the costs have risen astronomically at the minute. The cost on farms is one thing. So our goods are up a little bit. Yeah, I think farm and agriculture right throughout the UK. COVID has actually done it good in that sense. People have been buying and thankfully supporting British produce, and that has done us good. But our costs are rising horrendously. We did see a couple of flexibilities came through there. One in chilled meats, which I would say was a red herring. We're an exporting region. We can make all the sausages we need in Northern Ireland. Yes, the choice is good for consumers, but that was a red herring, really. The other thing the EU gave and let the UK authorization cover Northern Ireland. There is something there that needs to be tackled, and that type of plant protection products or animal medicines. I think I'll leave it there. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Well, Mr. Chestnut, thank you for that, and thank you for offering us the less than palatable sounding red herring on chilled meats. I'm not necessarily sure I'll be running off to place an order for that, but no, thank you for that comprehensive assessment. And I won't name my musical savvy colleague, but I was being reminded I've misled the committee, and in particular Sarah Hards. It was, of course, Maria von Trapp who suggested that we start at the very beginning and not Mary Poppins. Same actress, different film. Let's turn to...
You'll be forgiven this time, Simon. You'll be forgiven.
You're very kind. You're very kind. Let's hear from Riccardo Tonelli now, please. Riccardo.
Thank you, Chair. I represent Larnava Limited and associated with it the two ferries that go across 8 times or 7 times a day from Scotland. And I'll start with an observation. And we spoke probably 3 to 4 months ago, and I was proud of how my team interacted through a pandemic, through Brexit cliff edges with the various arms of the government that were asking us to collaborate and enforce new rules, westbound good movement records and whatnot. And that story continues. So we have successfully continued to operate traffic of all kinds, with the big difference between then and now that, but as a matter of fact, we also have some tourists or families rejoining each other as they're more free to travel. So that is the most significant change in terms of what you see coming in and out of our port. But in terms of the hurdles related to, ease of trade and all sorts of bureaucratic hurdles, they're still all there, and there are some clouds on the horizon. We interact with DIRA, Border Force, HMRC, PSNI, and local council. This is just in Larne. We also have a Scottish side to deal with, which has exactly the equivalent. And in an equally devolved administration, they also have own sets of rules. So up until now, we had to look for and work with various companies and various arms of the central government and devolved authorities to facilitate movements with westbound documentation needed. Soon enough, we're looking at eastbound various bits of documentation needed without going into too much detail. And some have said that this is kind of in contrast with the concept of unfettered access. In all fairness, we managed through it, went through it quite well. My proudest moment is that we never had a queue at either of the ports. So that was, believe me, not through just through sheer luck, but through enormous effort and coordinating customers, authorities, systems, and of course, ultimately is the shipper who has to understand all of it. So as we get sort of up to speed with today's protocol, there are new requirements that are coming in the next few months. And my concern is that the coordination between the various arms of the government and the industry is less than perfect. It could be better. Example of that is that not many people were aware of westbound GMRs for goods originating in the Republic of Ireland as of the 4th of July. So we are ready for it. A couple of months ago, this was applied to a slightly different category of goods. And we were joking that we will never see endangered species or anything like that that required that level of documentation. Guess what? The next day, we carried a live giraffe from the zoo of Belfast. So that was our first example of that. And that is it in terms of the protocol-related bureaucracy. So you should also know that we had to employ extra people in Scotland to deal with the westbound requirements. Do we then need to plan for extra people to do the same when it's clear to us what we need to do eastbound? So, more clarity would help. But if we then go to the trade side of things, I am sure that the healthy, if you can call it that, the healthy volumes coming through the ports have been helped by the difficulty into getting into Republic of Ireland from the UK, from GB in the central or southern corridors due to COVID-related restrictions. So it's much easier to drive up to Stranraer and then go either Belfast or Larne and then drive south than it is certainly to go and take a ferry from Liverpool into Dublin or from Holyhead into Dublin. That might change those dynamics in the future. We don't know that yet, but I assume that it is not an insignificant factor as and when we're freer to travel within the CTA. I also note how the same pressures that my neighbour Sarah faces on haulage in terms of wage inflation are also felt certainly in my port in other areas. So the skilled labour wages, there are certainly pressures, and I don't know if these are external inflationary pressures that come in and then or furlough related, but they certainly are real. They are real. We feel them. The final point I would make is that the lack of clarity on where Northern Ireland's going with Freeport is causing a little bit of frustration because we sense a great opportunity, and as Larne Harbour Limited, we also operate the Port of Stranraer. That unique link between Scotland and Northern Ireland, and if you like, between, through the EU protocol, is not insignificant. And, I'd like to see more activity and more focus. I know there's consultants working with Ministry of Finance, but it is an opportunity for all of us to exert whatever tax tools or incentive to bring a bit more of a level playing field for Northern Ireland and for us as a private operator in terms of, growing our business, supporting local jobs and whatnot.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very, very helpful, I'm sure. Let's turn now to Fresh from his, I follow him on Twitter, the amount of running Mr. Connolly does. I mean, I'm exhausted just reading his Twitter feed. He always seems to be out jogging around the place, looking terribly fit and healthy. But Mr. Connolly, is everything in the retail sector fit and healthy, or is it like you pounding the pavements, building up the fitness? I think it's a frightful segue, Aidan, to introducing you, but you're very welcome, and let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I think that's actually quite a good analogy, because The only reason that things are working as well as they are is because of the hard work of the retailers, our friends in manufacturing, and of course, our friends in logistics. If I could start off talking about the retail industry, and then, as you know, I'm the chair or the convener of the Northern Ireland Brexit Business Brexit Working Group. So there's a couple of points I want to make on their behalf. As far as retail is concerned, some things have been working well. If you look at where we were at the start of the year, we had these two opposing narratives. One saying that we were all starving, which was absolutely nonsense, and one saying that it was absolutely fine, which was absolutely nonsense. The truth is, the average supermarket holds between 40 and 50,000 product lines. We only ever had the worst off supermarket was missing, I think, around 600 product lines. The best off was missing a couple of tens, shall we say, of it. So that we have to be very careful here about the different narratives rather than what is actually happening on the ground. What has been working well is the engagement that we've been having with government. And also the STAMNI process, that process that was brought in to, as far as attestations that were needed instead of EHCs. And I have to pay tribute at this point to the DAERA staff, and in particular the Deputy Chief Veterinary Officer, Brian Dooher, for the sterling work that he's done, being on call at all hours and really making sure that not only were things moving, but that we as retailers and our colleagues in logistics were aware of our responsibilities and how to live up to those very easily. So that's something that does need commended. As far as customs are concerned, we always knew that there were going to be issues with customs, quite simply because the majority of businesses that were now filling in customs paperwork had never had that sort of paperwork to do before. So that was challenging. However, again, we have gotten used to it. But again, wherever there is friction, there is cost, and retailers have absorbed, to the most part, that cost, but that can't go on forever. On the chilled meats, just to reiterate what my colleague from the UFU said, the sausage wars, firstly, if people think that's what a trade war is, they're really going to be surprised when there is an actual trade war. That is not a trade war. That wasn't even a trade handbags at dawn. So to be aware of the sort of language we're using there. It was not so much of a red herring, but it was, it is an emotive issue that is of no doubt. But as far as trade terms is concerned, it's a peripheral issue. And one of the reasons isn't just because of the change in supply chains. One of the reasons is for this past 10 years, GB retailers have started buying more and more Northern Ireland produce. And in fact, we're now buying over 2.8 billion of Northern Ireland agri-food. We're 1.9 people in Northern Ireland. We actually feed about 10 million people altogether. We are the breadbasket of the UK in that way. So
I think that's Dorset's role, but I'll let you try and claim it.
Well, again, that could be handbags at dawn between us. However, the other thing that went well was the extension of that EHC grace period that was in March. Now, be in no doubt, we believe that all these things should be done on a bilateral basis with agreement that builds trust, because trust is going to be needed going forward. However, the decision needed to be taken. The decision was taken on the Wednesday and publicised. That Friday, some of the major retailers were going to have to make decisions that would have affected choice and affordability to Northern Ireland householders. So that it did need it done. However, we were very glad whenever the extension to the grace period on chilled meats was asked for and acquiesced to by the EU, because that shows that it is working. That being said, there are some real concerns, and this past couple of weeks especially, we've been having lots of meetings with our grocery members on what is coming down the tracks. We are heading towards, as Sarah said, a perfect storm in October, when we will need export health certificates. Those export health certificates not only need time for people to fill them in, but they also need vets. So you're talking about a cost that's there. We simply don't know if there's going to be the veterinary capacity. We simply don't know if there what the sort of cost implications of that will be. You're also talking that there will be need for organic certificates, VIN certificates for wine, phytosanitary certificates for plant matter, and this is on top of the end of the chilled meats grace period. And there's lots of things coming at the one time there, including EU to GB checks. You got to remember that for the consumer in GB, they won't really have felt any of that because those controls, both paperwork and physical, have not come in yet. They'll be phased in from October until January next year. And because we're at the end of the supply chain, there could be a knock on them. So our big thrust at the moment, as far as retail is concerned, is asking Lord Frost, the Prime Minister, Cabinet Office, as well as the EU and Vice President Šefčovič, to urgently find a solution now for us. The most frustrating thing for business across Northern Ireland is we can see the solutions. We just don't see the political will to deliver them. So for us, a veterinary agreement with a guillotine clause that would allow it to kick in whenever the UK did get one of these wonderful new trade deals in place and implemented, so Australia or US. But up until then, we could follow the EU regime, and that would not only just help us in Northern Ireland get things in, it would help us export, it would help Scottish fishermen, it would help Welsh lamb farmers, and it would help consumers across the UK keep prices down because you're removing that friction. And that would also, most importantly, buy us time to get a trusted trader scheme in place. Now, that trusted trader scheme needs to be more than the digital assistance scheme that is being, the digital assistance scheme as is, while it's wonderful, people are working on it, while it's wonderful that it is being done, the only thing it's going to do is save a few trees, unless it is used as a robust basis, an evidentiary basis for a trusted trader scheme. Now, our supply chains are beyond reproach. Our supply chains have a wonderful audit trail. It's not about whether we comply or not. It's about how do we show that compliance to the EU to allow them to rubber stamp it and go, yes, that is keeping within the single market regulation. So that needs to be done urgently, and we are severely running out of time. As far as the other issues for the Northern Ireland Business Brexit Working Group, if I just bring it up. Again, a lot of business is thankful that the protocol is there because there is they don't see that there is an alternative to it. They realize that there are challenges. We're still asking for those things that we asked for at the start, that certainty, a stability, which is the extension of the grace period, and maybe an extension to any sort of period that would allow us to get a long-term solution in place. We need certainty. That is that long-term solution that's delivered with business. And again, these things that are being talked about with the EU and medicines, with the UK and what Lord Frost is going to talk about next week in the House, neither of which have been have they talked to us to see whether they work. Now, they have been talking to us on an ongoing basis, and we hope that's reflected. But unless we can check it off and see whether it works for us, there is a concern there. We still need that simplicity. Again, that is trusted trader agreement, that is removing that friction. That, again, the digital assistance scheme can help with that. And then there's, of course, the affordability. All this needs to be done to keep business competitive and to give Northern Ireland households choice and affordability they need. I've already talked about the trusted trader agreement and the veterinary agreement. We're still waiting on that consultative group that was agreed by Michael Gove and Vice President Šefčovič, and then agreed again with Lord Frost and Vice President Šefčovič. The at-risk test, I know was mentioned earlier on, but it is under the joint committee, and the legal text permits the joint committee to amend that test of at risk. We need that broadened out as much as possible. It's not just for our colleagues in manufacturing. It's for anyone who is bringing goods into Northern Ireland, should that be for final consumption or should that be for further processing. We still have problems with establishment and we need to extend and embed that UK trader scheme easement and make it easier to get that establishment. Rules of origin is an ongoing area of confusion, and our ask on that is for clarity. Stephen has mentioned quotas, and that is going to be an ongoing issue. Supplementary declarations were mentioned by Sarah, and again, that is something that, for all intents and purposes, if it's remaining in the UK customs territory, it's pure bureaucratic activity for no value. So again, they need to look at that. The education of supply chain and consumers is hugely important. To be honest, that's one of the biggest things that we have asked both sides to do. We need GB suppliers to be educated about how easy it is using the different schemes, including TSS, to send things to Northern Ireland. And we also need the EU, because there are still some problems there. So in essence, it's a lot better than having no deal. It's a lot better than having just the sort of TCA arrangements. I think we need to be very careful about how we apportion blame on this, whether it is a part of whether it is part of, for example, the COVID and which has increased costs, whether it is the TCA, whether it is the protocol, or whether it is Brexit itself, which has caused these costs. However, what I will leave you with is the simple fact that we need movement from both the EU and the UK. We need them to live up to their commitment in the protocol when they said that the protocol would be implemented with the least disruption to Northern Ireland communities. That means either trusted trader or a veterinary agreement before the 1st of October.
Mr. Connolly, thank you. Wide-ranging and informative, as always. I'm grateful. Let me ask you, excuse me, this question, and I'm going to turn to Claire Hannah first and look to other colleagues to feed in as well. Without apportioning blame, you've obviously been talking to ministers in Whitehall, and you've obviously been talking to people in Brussels as well. If 1 is hopeless and 10 is brilliant, in terms of an open-minded, flexible, let's get together and solve this issue or that issue, which approach and mindset is scoring highest, Whitehall or Brussels?
It really depends on which area you're talking about. For example, the EU, and I was quite disappointed actually with the some of the reaction to the EU package that was put out last week, the week before, because it was quite dumbed down, both quite talked down in the media, both in Northern Ireland and across the UK, when that really took a lot for them to do. I think we have to realise that the EU is not a negotiation territory here. There is no mandate for negotiation, and anything that they're trying to do will have to go past the member states. They simply don't have the mandate. I think what we really have here is a friction between ideology and economics. We can see the solutions, for example, that veterinary agreement. Now, the EU wants dynamic alignment. The UK wants some sort of regulatory equivalence. Someone's going to have to move on that one. But both of them are just as steadfastly stubborn, shall we say, on that area. But honestly, I think there's more that can be done on both sides.
Okay, thank you. Just so I'm alerting colleagues, so I'm not calling them cold, I'm going to call Claire Hannah, Gregory Campbell, and then Stephen Farry. But let's hear from Claire.
Thanks very much, folks. That's been really, really useful to get all of that information and facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly of how this is working. And it's very clear how much work has gone in by your sectors, and also very clear how much more both the UK and the EU can do to support that work. And I just wanted to pick up on that. Aidan, you mentioned that the Business Consultative Forum hasn't got up and running yet. And I suppose there is understandably a lot of narrative and a lot of he said, she said, or usually he said about who is responsible for a lot of these decisions. Have you had many opportunities or enough opportunities to have both the EU and the UK in the same room at the same time to prevent blame and the buck being passed, about who is responsible? And if not, would that be something that is valuable?
I think it's hugely valuable. I think it's one of the reasons why we in the Northern Ireland Business Brexit Working Group asked for that consultative forum or consultative body to be set up. At the minute, things are happening rather ad hoc. And while we have met with Lord Frost on his own a few times actually, we've met with Vice President Šefčovič and Lord Frost, I think 3 times now together. And we have met with the heads of the joint heads of the specialised committee once. Now, what we have been trying to do beforehand, because it sort of gets into this rhythm where you have the 15 members of our working group and we all get 2 minutes to say what's wrong, and then there's a summing up. We've actually tried to move away from that. So every time now that we're told there's a meeting, we produce a position paper and say to them, right, this is what we actually want to talk about. So we are not in that sort of update and agenda framework yet, and that's where we need to do, because you got to realize, as much as Lord Frost is a busy man and Vice President Šefčovič is as well, we're busy with our members as well, and they need to see that we're making progress, and that's the most frustrating thing. We are getting kind words and sympathy. What we really need is delivery and solutions.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to hog it, but briefly, Stephen Kelly, you spoke about the desire among some of your members for government and the NI executive to help them realise some of the opportunities. And obviously you're speaking for manufacturing, but from what I've picked up from Sarah Hards and from Aidan Connolly is that there's been an uplift for local food producers here, which is good. But what would that support and enhancement and facilitation of those opportunities look like to you and to your members?
Good morning. I'll begin with the easy one, which should be the easy one, which is both investors and customers and indeed suppliers are looking in, and they're getting a schizophrenic message from Northern Ireland. They're getting a message that this is a wonderful place. It's a great place to do business. It's a great place to invest. It's a great place to make as your home. But equally, they're getting a message that we're going to hell in a handcart. And the reality for our members is the former and not the latter. They've chosen to make Northern Ireland their home, not just because they're from their business home, not just because they're from here, but actually they've got great people. They've got their supply chain sorted. And they're able to sell their goods at markets at home and abroad. So for them, it begins with actually having a very, very clear, agreed narrative around what a great place Northern Ireland is to do business. The second thing is that there is next to nobody out there in the EU or indeed within the rest of the UK who's actually explaining what the protocol is, explaining what the responsibilities are from those markets to access and to buy or to supply into Northern Ireland. And there's nobody out there helping those markets actually continue to trade with us. That's been left to individual businesses. We know this because in January, just over half of manufacturers reported that their GB suppliers were unprepared for the 1st of January and the new challenges. When we asked them again in March, just over half said that their GB suppliers were unprepared, despite all the effort that manufacturers are putting in, the investment in TSS, et cetera, really wasn't cutting through with GB suppliers. So we need the Northern Ireland Executive out there batting on our behalf, need the Northern Ireland Executive out there explaining the responsibilities that people have in and around the protocol, and needing the Northern Ireland Executive out there really saying what a great place Northern Ireland is to do business. But investors and suppliers and customers are getting a confused message around that.
Thanks very much. That chimes with what we heard last week from the voluntary and community sector. Everybody's talking about whether they like it or they don't like it, but nobody's really explaining what the protocol does and doesn't do. Chair, I know there's other members keen to get in, so I'll hand back for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Gregory.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, witnesses. I want to go back to something Stephen had mentioned. Stephen, when you were doing your survey, you didn't outline roughly how many people took part in the survey, just approximately.
Mr. Kelly?
On mute.
I'm just finding the number there for you, Mr. Campbell. There was 190 companies responded.
Okay, it's just I've done a similar survey in my own constituency, and there's just over about 30 in that one constituency took part. So I suppose if you multiply that up, that might equate to about 400 or 500 across Northern Ireland. And some of the findings are quite similar, others not. Just the issue that you said about the change in opinions, and I think you gave a figure of a change between 23% and 29%. Was that right? But I can't remember what that was the answer, but I can't remember what the question was. Was that about the perception of things getting worse or staying the same?
That change in that figure was relating to. I'll need to take that back out for you, but it was that I think it was relating to EU customers, where they were unaware of the responsibility. So the timing of when those surveys took place is important, because the first survey was at the end of month one. Month one was a much simplified process. Month one was just the basic first step of the frontier declaration that's required to send stuff to Northern Ireland. A thing called the ENS. That's followed then by month three, which is the full supplementary declaration, which is equivalent to the full frontier declaration being completed. So it's understandable to us that actually there's more, at that period in time, there's more visible friction. Sarah talked about that in terms of having to complete those supplementary declarations, incomplete information, erroneous information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no surprise really that those numbers are growing a little bit. My forecast for the survey that we've just launched for the end of 6 months will report that people are getting to grips with those things, but that it doesn't remove the challenge that has been presented to their business. So a lot of people, Prime Minister and others, said that we need to kind of sand down the barnacles on the bottom of the boat, or whatever the phrase was that was used. Everybody's experiencing these frictions. Even if they get used to them, it doesn't mean that they're not causing problems for their business. Just because people get used to the systems, the processes, the controls, doesn't mean that it is doing no harm. These things all come with cost. These things add complexity and confusion. And regardless of whether you get used to it or not, it continues to create problems in the long term for your competitiveness of your business.
Yeah, it's just that in the survey I carried out, I subdivided it in three, if you like. First of all, the first 3 months of the experience with the protocol, January to the end of March. Then the second part was the beginning of April to the beginning of July. But I felt the most important point was to ask them then, what did they envisage beyond the end of the grace period, the problems being? And a very small minority said that they didn't envisage problems because of the nature of their business. But a significant majority of them said that they felt the problems that they had encountered to date would actually get significantly worse. And I'm just wondering if you asked any of your members about future prospects, or is yours more a survey of past experiences rather than expectations of what will happen in the future?
Well, I've reported that already, where 77% had said that they'd experienced problems since the beginning of the year, and 36% believed that those problems would persist. What I would say is that the grace periods are largely not related to anything that's in manufacturing, with the exception of maybe parcels, things like the grace periods that have been already extended, largely are in and around retail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We do have members in food service. We do have members in the wider agri-food side, but the grace periods don't really do much for our guys.
Yeah, that's fine. I wanted actually to bring the grace period over to Mr. Connolly, if I could, Chair, just to ask about future prospects and what your members, Mr. Connolly, are considering will happen, for example, in the next 6 months and beyond. Are they optimistic, pessimistic, or neutral?
I think they're concerned. So I would represent over 90% of the grocery market, and I think grocery is where it is going to be felt most, quite simply because of the SPS requirements and the need for export health certificates. Other areas will feel things are feeling things on customs, and there are other things that will come in at the end of the grace period for parcels, etc. And we're actually doing a lot of work with ACES, which is the trade body for fast parcel delivery. So those will have their own problems. The greatest concern, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is the urgency on the need for a trusted trader scheme, or a veterinary agreement, and not just an SPS agreement on the EHCs, but a veterinary agreement that will cover things like organics, fish, phytosanitary, and that sort of thing, which is done, but which is there's an ability for it to be done, but you've got economics meeting ideology, and it's not happening yet. So if it doesn't happen, we are. This past 3 or 4 weeks, especially, we're in daily contact with our membership, talking about the fact that there could be problems with both choice about what we're able to send over and affordability, because with friction there comes cost, and that's one of the reasons why we have been so vocal over this past 6 months, saying every time we get something from the EU or the UK government, we keep saying, great, now what else are you going to do for us? Because we do need either that trusted trader scheme or the veterinary agreement to allow us to get to a trusted trader scheme. We're not pressing the big red button yet. There is we're completely committed to Northern Ireland and to households in Northern Ireland. What we're trying to do is to make the UK government and the EU understand that they need to deliver a solution now that removes that friction, because otherwise we won't be able to give the same choice or the same affordability. It is that simple.
Okay, thanks, Chair. That's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Farry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to all of our witnesses.
And then Stephen, forgive me, and then I'll be turning to Ian Paisley.
Okay.
Ian, so stand by. So Stephen.
Sure, thank you. I just want to focus in particular on Victor and Aidan around food and animal movements in particular. Just one small point for Victor, just to pick up on around what was announced on the 30th of June in relation to livestock movements from the European Commission. Appreciate we're still awaiting the detail, but to what extent are you encouraged or otherwise by what was said in that respect? How helpful is that? And then perhaps for both of you in a more general sense, maybe just to tease out across both of you what we are looking for in terms of a veterinary agreement, because I think both of you said things that were maybe slightly different in the sense that Victor was talking about probably something in a landing zone between Switzerland and New Zealand, recognising that perhaps as much as a Swiss-style agreement makes most sense, the UK is adamant that that's not what they want, so we need to find a landing zone in between. Whereas Aidan was talking about perhaps going on a temporary basis for the full alignment in recognition that there's no immediate prospect of a US trade deal, but at that point, thereafter, that could be switched off, and by that stage, other measures could be in place that would take over and do the same job and allow the UK to do its own trade deals. So just maybe just to tease out a little bit more, where both of you see the potential landing zone in terms of a veterinary agreement between the UK and EU positions, and just to confirm that both of you see that perhaps as the most critical issue to be resolved over the course of the next 2 to 3 months. And also, Victor, just to pick up that very discrete point around the livestock movements too.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come in, and thanks, Stephen, for your question. I'll take the first part of the question first on our live animal exports, or if you call them, into the UK. That industry is quite a small industry in Northern Ireland agri-food. terms, you know, that pedigree side of the top of that pyramid. But for many farm businesses in Northern Ireland on our small family farms, that was very, very important. And it may have been that it was that one day in the year to that ram sales, be it whatever. That trade has collapsed. It's devastated. It's almost non-existent. We've gone from, you know, one sale yard from 120 bulls to 2 or 3. That shows no sign of easing. And, you know, 100% of those people on those farms would say, scrap this protocol, it's not working, because there doesn't seem to be any sort of flexibility and any sort of give. And I'll say this, especially on the European side. I met 7H and Gove one day along with Aidan and the rest of the group and sorting them out. And I thought, hey, here we're going somewhere. The very next day I was on a European joint unions meeting with Michel Barnier. And he said, tell your farmers that in Northern Ireland, there'll be no such thing as flexibilities. UK is left, don't come to us with their problems. And this type of attitude is very, very unhelpful to Northern Ireland. And really, we need that political will to get things sorted out. Marcus 7H and Gove at that stage, I thought things were going to move. But then Barney, the chief vet, was on the same page as Michel Barney about a month later at another meeting, whereby he didn't seem to be. You went on to the veterinary agreements and whether we're not going to get equivalence, but we need some recognition, be it some style. I think it's probably unhelpful to label it with Swiss or New Zealand or something else. I think we need a bespoke one for Northern Ireland that you know, nothing changed in the 1st of January except the date. We surely are starting in the same place. It's surely not beyond the realms of possibility to get some sort of recognition if the political will was there to do it. I want to maybe expand a couple of bits on 2 points I missed maybe in my start. Seeds are becoming a problem. Seeds, especially for the autumn now, for cereals, need to come in from UK. Again, we're having issues. We did have some given that, and that is welcome. And that last announcement on seeds and payments for some of those things from the UK, that is welcome. One of the other major issues that's affecting us in Northern Ireland, the EU are continuing to make new rules. In fact, there's one came through yesterday, the 14th of July at 4:30 yesterday. You know, Northern Ireland are bound by these rules. We have no way of feeding into how these rules are made or say how they will affect us. And I just think there's there's something fundamentally wrong with a country, i.e. Northern Ireland, that has to take rules imposed on us with no way of feeding in what we think of it. So I think there's something that needs to be sorted out there. Those EU animal health rules, indeed, rules now for carbon and that's going to affect fertilizer. It's going to leave us at a disadvantage from our UK counterparts because we may be working to a different specification and we will have extra costs. It's very concerning what I see coming forward from European rules that's going to affect Northern Ireland, even though we're in a UK customs zone. It could leave us in a customs zone with higher costs because we're working to a different EU regulatory requirement. So sorry for expanding out on that one, but it's just something I've missed maybe the first time round.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Stephen, do you want to come back? I think I wanted to ask Mr. Connolly the same.
Yes,
point.
I'll just pass over to Aidan.
I'm on mute, I know. I neither want to be proscriptive or prescriptive on this as far as what is needed. The simplest one is to do the Swiss deal, which would remove around 80% of checks and 80% of paperwork. New Zealand is different in the fact that things that are moved from New Zealand are usually 3 or 4 commodities per tanker, and there's huge amounts of them, whereas the average load going, a medium-sized load going to a supermarket would have 650, a large load would have over 1,200 different products on it, so it's not exactly the same. However, I do think that there is a landing zone now. At the moment, it may look like we're in a parachute and we're trying to land on the head of a needle, but there is a landing zone of a Northern Ireland style that would be more than regulatory equivalence, but less than regulatory alignment. However, again, while we see the technical solution in this very easily, it's the political will that is needed to deliver it, and quite frankly, we haven't seen that. So our big ask to the EU and to the UK is to get into that zone, because time is ticking.
And just, Chair, very, very briefly, conscious of time, just to follow up with Aidan, I mean, do you see the governance issue, I mean, particularly the role or stroke concerns in relation to the European Court of Justice? Is that the area where perhaps some degree of flexibility and pragmatism could unlock something?
I do think that it's an area where flexibility, well, we have to look at what's in the structures. And you got to remember, the EU is very, very clear about this, that there is flexibility within the acquis, but there is not, you cannot break the acquis. Now, you can bend it until almost breaking, but you cannot actually break it. And then we have the ability within the joint committee to move on these things. And in particular, if you look at the one of at risk, that can be broadened just by the joint committee. The joint committee have that power. We need to see them flexing that power. We also need to see them having meetings that last longer than 1 hour. For example, you know, we in the Brexit working group regularly have 2-3 hour meetings where we're trying to hammer out a joint position for 15 trade bodies that covers over 85% of business in Northern Ireland. We want to see the same with the EU and the UK hammering out those things, but we also need to see the same with them doing it with us, because any of this stuff needs to be done with business, not to business.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quite a worrying presentation all round. You know, if we take some of the survey findings there, that those who want to see the protocol changed, mitigated or compensated for, combined with those who want to see it scrapped, it's over 73%. 77% of those have had problems and they're still persisting. A number of farmers, 100% in some instances, want this protocol scrapped. So Ian was very good at setting out 3 areas there that if he had Mr. Frost in a room on his own, or Lord Frost in a room on his own, he would seek 3 major changes, you know, on the at-risk category being broadened, on the trusted trader scheme being improved, not beyond paperwork in that regard, and then the veterinary agreement with a guillotine clause. Could I ask our other witnesses, namely Victor, Ricardo and Sarah, if they had Lord Frost in a room on his own, what they would put on a wish list or on a checklist?
That's a very leading question, Ian.
In terms of the changes to the protocol, because obviously, you know, that is the space where the government is in terms of wanting to seek changes. If it's not sustainable, where do they want to see changes? And if you had them with regards to your sector, and Aidan's outlined for his sector, and probably there's some overlap there, Aidan, to be fair, but if go through them, Victor, Ricardo and Sarah, if you had Lord Frost on your own, what would you really want to see changed, so that we could maybe help push for those things?
Yes, thanks, Ian. Look, again, we need to get through everything just sector by sector, and I'm not going to go over my initial presentation, but we need flexibilities delivered. And if the EU is not going to come to the table, we need these implemented from the UK unilaterally. We can't go on as we're going. Our pedigree cattle society and sheep farmers are devastated. Having said that, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to keep our produce going both ways. We need him again, along with the EU, to lobby for that milk that goes south for processing when it goes out the EU, to be, if we're in a EU regulatory zone, to be part of that regulatory zone. But if Northern Ireland is to be considered that place apart, it needs those flexibilities imposed. And, you know, I think, talking to our Chief Veterinary Officer, He now has got the EU's veterinary officer